Howdy Google Ads fans, and welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about dynamic search ads, which is an interesting feature that Google allows you to potentially set up in this step of creating a campaign. Of course, you could come back and modify it later, and it removes keywords, bidding, ad creation. It essentially tells Google, this works the best, by the way, if you have a larger website, a very organized website, and lots of inventory. You might be running shopping campaigns, and it might take a lot of time and effort to create customized campaigns for every single section of your site. That itself is not an excuse to use dynamic search ads. You obviously only want to be using dynamic search ads if it's something which is going to be more profitable for you, which is why I suggest using dynamic search ads to potentially find areas of your site that you should then invest more time in. So Poppin might be a very good example of that. But first, let me just again describe what dynamic search ads are. Google will use its index of your site or a page feed of specific URLs that you upload through the area of the Google Ads account where you upload this page feed, and I'll show that to you in a minute. It will read all the different content on your site. So it will take a look at the sitemap, your categories, your product categories, your actual products. This could be for services as well. And Google will then decide, based on the search terms that a person is looking for on Google, searching for on Google, whether or not you should have an ad in the auction, and they'll determine a bid, and they'll basically write that ad for you. When we go into the next section is going to be talking about ad group structure, but after that we'll be talking about ad writing. We'll go through creating dynamic ads step by step, and you'll see exactly the options you have available to you. But just view it as a campaign that's sort of set up for you based on your website. So you would enter in, first, if I wanted to enable dynamic search ads, I would select this button. And I also want to say that if this is a first-time campaign, and this is an account that doesn't have a lot of data, and you don't have a huge website, do not use dynamic search ads. It's a good tool to find other areas of a large site or other products in a large catalog that might be worth then going and creating your own manual campaigns for. But from the beginning, from the outset, I would not select to enable dynamic search ads, but say that I were. So Google pre-populates my domain. So I could then, Google in the next step, as I set up my ad groups, they're going to set up dynamic ad groups for me. So I'm going to keep this selected just so we see what it looks like. But in most cases, you want to keep this deselected. You have the option below to use Google's index of my entire site. So if I'm Poppin and I'm back over here and I see that there's like all these different sorts of categories. There's office supplies with lots of categories, design services with lots of categories, and I might be setting up some search campaigns for office chairs and file cabinets and tables, and I'm going to start there. And then I might have and this is something that I would probably do if Poppin was a client. I would take the time to set up really thorough, really specific campaigns for 3-4 top selling categories, and then I would run a dynamic search campaign at a very light budget. If maybe 5% of what the overall account budget is for a few weeks, and then I could look and see which areas of the site is Google giving me the most traffic for. It's a really great way to do research, right? It helps you figure out if there's a specific product you might not have thought. That corporate branding for desktop organization is a really hot category, and Google's been sending me some really good traffic. Now I see that happening through this dynamic search ads campaign. And again, it's not keywords. Like, I'm not choosing. I'm just telling Google, look at my entire site, and you choose what ads to show for when, what the headlines are, what page they go to, et cetera, et cetera. It's like totally in Google's hands, the entire campaign. Sort of like how we had automated bidding strategies to choose the bid for a keyword. You're putting that in Google's hands. Over here, I'm saying, my advertising is sort of in your hands, but it's not a bad way to get some good research done. And that's a use case, a very common use case that we use here in the agency, and it's actually quite effective. And it's definitely better than some of the more archaic ways of research that we conducted in the past before dynamic search ads were a thing. And also this is providing that your client or you have the budget to put in towards dynamic search ads, because there's no guarantee, and there's a good chance that it won't be profitable or the money won't be spent well. So you have to sort of tell your client, or you have to go into it with the attitude that I'm going to be exploring a feature that Google has to see if it could work for us. And that's never a bad thing if it's done with control. So I could also just use URLs for my page feed. I can't select that because I haven't uploaded a page feed yet. I could use URLs from Google's index and from my page feed. A page feed is really just uploading a specific list of URLs you want them to look at. So for example, I might not want let's say I don't want to run any ads to my design services. So I could upload a list of URLs that include everything on my site that I want Google to look at for these dynamic search ads, except for the URLs over here. So if I look at, I don't want them advertising for case studies about furniture. So I would do, for business case studies. I would leave that URL out of my page feed when I upload it to Google, and then I'll get no ads coming to this area of the site through dynamic search ads, and Google will not read the content on these pages when they're determining whether or not they should show an ad in the auction for a dynamic search ad. That's essentially what dynamic search ads are. There's really not much more to them. There'll be more context given. I'll be able to give you more context when we get into the dynamic search ads ad in the chapter where we talk about actually creating ads and best practices for ads, and then we can look at how to analyze results from dynamic search ads or creating a new dynamic search ad from scratch, new dynamic search campaign from scratch. The other thing that I would recommend is, again, you know how much I am into organization and clarity of data. I would not want you enabling dynamic search ads inside a typical search campaign. If you want to test dynamic search ads, create a separate campaign for it. That way it's organized. When you go into your Google Ads account, you look at your campaigns, you're looking at data. I know that this is the data: conversions, clicks, impressions, click-through rate, cost per click, average position for a search campaign that I'm actually optimizing and working on. And these are my results, and this is the stuff that's going on in my dynamic search campaign. So even if you want to run dynamic search ads for the sake of research, don't do it here. Do it in a new campaign. And I'm going to show you what it looks like to create a dynamic search ads campaign from scratch. So in fact, I'm going to leave that unselected for now, or deselected for now. Audiences, I want to skip audiences for now. I was thinking originally to go over in-market segments, affinity audiences, remarketing lists, how audiences work, but then I decided that this should really be a chapter unto itself, a separate section, understanding audiences and how that gets layered over actual campaigns. So I'm going to skip audiences for now, and when you're creating your campaign, you could also skip audiences. There's enough to deal with setting up the core campaign really well, where you don't have to create or add any audiences to the campaigns yet. It's an extremely good idea, and it's an extremely important idea to come back and then add audiences to the campaign afterwards, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a future lecture when we talk about audiences. So we're going to twirl audiences back up, and then we're going to go into the next lectures about site link extensions and all the different types of extensions we have available to us. And I will see you there in a couple seconds. Looking forward to it.